hell is this, ma'am? Are you hiding? You got lights in there?
NYPD Blue had a sort of an interesting genesis.
The prevailing wisdom at that point was that the hour drama was dead.
There had been no new hour hits since L.A. Law, which was in 1986.
His perception was that network television was being and was going to be decimated by cable television.
I wanted to do a show that really pushed the boundaries in terms of language and sexuality.
And because he didn't want the language to be, or the nudity to be gratuitous, he was looking for a venue which would where the materials would justify that kind of approach.
They wanted to tell adult stories in an adult manner to adults.
Networks like to program the familiar. So here is Stephen Bochco and David Milch, to a lesser extent, wanting to do a cop show. Okay, that's okay. That's Tell Street Blues, you know, that works. And our rating, that doesn't work.
We wrote this first script, and it was sensational. And they wouldn't approve it. Broadcast standards wouldn't approve it.
They set about dragging their heels, trying to get us off the R rating part of it. They sort of agreed in the abstract and then confounded us in the particular. Every word was no, and you couldn't do this, you couldn't say that, you couldn't show this.
I think they assumed we would sort of come off a lot of what we put on the page, and we didn't. I said, we're not going to make the show. And we didn't. So we skipped 1992.
When the network says, no, you're not going to be on for a year, the obvious reaction is these no-talent, mindless assholes. And it was the best thing they ever could have done.
David Milch came to New York. I met with him. I told him, no way am I leaving the police department. I'd be happy to talk to him about what I do.
Because of that extra year, I got to spend that time in New York City with cops.
I would relate stories to him that I had worked, cases that I felt were interesting.
You never get a year and a half to prepare a series. Never. And through that strange combination of circumstances, we did. And it showed.
And then they came back to us. And they said, well, we really want this show. And I said, well, we really aren't going to change it.
And thank God Stephen had the tenacity and the vision to see it through.
We literally negotiated not only a glossary of language, but how many times you could use those words in any given episode. And do not ask me how we finally came up with the number 37, but that's my recollection, that we were allowed 37 uses of those words per episode.
I know about most of these things secondhand because, you know, I lack impulse control, and so I'm not perceived as an asset at a network meeting by either party.
Stephen principally was the guy, you know, who spoke to the network on I assume almost a daily basis.
Bob and I sat in his office like 9-year-olds with little pads and pencils, drawing pictures of naked girls, you know, to see, well, what could you see? Could you see this? Could you see that? You know, and so we literally negotiated every single aspect of it.
Even hearing about that stuff at second hand just bored me to stupefaction, but it had to be done.
And once we had that, once I was satisfied that we had something that was very close to what I had originally wanted, and certainly more explosively out there than anything that anyone had ever tried, I signed off on it.
Detective Sipowicz, please tell the court how you came to arrest Mr. Giardella.
This past August 27th, I was routinely surveilling the defendant because he's a known felon. During the course of the surveillance, I observed the defendant's vehicle have a flat tire.
It was so solid on the page, and whether it was the locations that we were picking out or the set that was being built by Paul Eads, the production designer, or the cast as it was filling out around David and Dennis. And Bill Clark, who is terribly important to this enterprise. Bill was really my right-hand person out there because I go, I don't want any holes in this. It's just the way it was done.
You know where Alphonse Giardella is?
No.
The good thing about this show was right from the beginning, Stephen Bochco and Greg Hoblet said that if I said that's the way it would be, that's the way we would do it. And if it wasn't going to be the way they directed it, I kind of come up with a way where they would get the dramatic effect, but stay real.
Tell Giardella that John Kelly wants to see him.
That was the big difference, I think, between this show and a lot of other shows.
You want to get in some trouble?
I'm up for that.
Because the show lived at a level of detail that really hadn't been experienced on television, I think, ever. The audience invested with confidence.
The first season with the controversy about the nudity and the strong language, I was not that much invested in the nudity. Not that I'm a prude, I felt from the storytelling as a cop, the language was something that you really needed.
Go on, laugh at me now! Get out of here! Laugh now, you dickhead! Get out of here!
Word of mouth started getting around, and people were freaking out. The affiliates, station managers, advertisers.
We didn't even have an ad between our main title and the first act that first year because there were so few advertisers who were willing to step up and get involved.
Jerry Falwell, the religious right. He spent $1 million probably in newspaper ads in every major newspaper in America, calling us perverts and worse. And of course, he hadn't seen anything.
The irony was that you just couldn't buy publicity like that. The P.T. Barnum understood that if you said you can't see what's behind the curtain, that's all anybody wants to do. In our case, what was behind the curtain, was David Caruso's bare ass and language that hadn't been heard before. But once you were back there, what you came to understand was that there was a whole world that you'd never seen before.
It's full of hair. Look, somebody's hair is clogging up this drain.
Yeah, well, I guess that rules you out as a suspect.
Oh, no, that's funny. No, really, that's funny. Comedian.
We came out of the box with a really coherent sense of what the entire arc of that season was going to be. And when you're trying to get an audience to invest in the world of a series...
Hey, I brought dinner.
The implicit invitation is, there's more here.
Where's the separation forms, Johnny?
The more you get to know these people, the more interested you're going to be, the more you're going to like them or dislike them.
Where you hiding your liquor bottles these days? I was 12 before I realized that wasn't what the saddlebags on my bike were for.
I had always wanted to do a police show that was more like what cops are like.
I'm also considering filing civil and criminal charges against you, detective, for assaulting my client when he came out of Rikers.
Your client slipped. So there was the coincidence of my sort of impulse to address specific material in a particular way.
Andy.
Hey, Miss District Attorney, you really prosecuted the crap out of that one.
And Stephen's idea of what kind of show was necessary to kind of resuscitate the hour drama.
You realize that if I don't hold up my end, so to speak, I may have to kill you.
So he kind of came at it from the macro perspective, and I came from it from the micro perspective, which is actually very good for me. Usually I'm sub-micro or microscopic.
I realize how you feel about him, John. Both of us know where Andy is right now. He's on a bar stool at Patrick's getting loaded.
One of the things which I think is true of cops, but is certainly true of our show, is the extent to which what looks to be a drama of the workplace is in fact a family drama.
This has got to stop, Andy. What's got to stop?
This. You're getting stiff every afternoon now.
The reason that I think that is true to life is because so many cops are raised in households where the idea of love is filtered through the idea of duty. That is, cops are emotionally stunted.
You know, it just seems that no matter how much you feel about someone, you never really get it squared away, you know?
And mostly what they're trained to do in their family is to serve.
I'm sorry. You know, I wished I could have helped you more, you know?
And it was in that dimension, really, that Bill Clark was such an asset for me.
When David was coming to New York to research the show, he asked a couple of them who to see as far as detectives, and it happened that he went to two guys, both of whom knew me, and they recommended me.
Bill was the archetypal caretaker. He was raised to take care of his grandma. He called his mom and dad every day. He lost a brother and felt always that it was his fault.
I'm sorry, James.
Oh, my God. My brother's dead.
Just the nuts and bolts of that kind of personality.
My little brother.
Someone who lived absolutely in service. That was all Bill. And I came to understand in the same way that Bill gravitated towards me, because I needed a lot of caretaking.
Open this for me.
I could see Kelly gravitating towards Sipowicz.
You get home all right?
Yeah.
It used to be that such a high percentage of cops were Irish or Italian. And the Catholic Church figured in a large way in their psyches. They believed by definition that they were unworthy, that they were sinful, that they were fuck-ups, and that the only way they could purge themselves of their shortcomings was to serve an institution. Presto. Cops.
I don't know what to do with this thing. I don't know how to help you.
I'm gonna be all right. I killed Angelo Marino and his driver.
I got to see Kelly's shortcomings, even though these shortcomings, when you see Bill's shortcomings, they're in the context of such a heroic, great soul.
I don't know, man. I'm just struggling with her giving herself up.
You know, she did what she wanted to do. You can't live other people's lives for them.
Now, most cops, the job wasn't enough, and it was called the job. Capital T, capital J. And so they drank.
Leanne hurt me twice.
Because nothing was ever enough.
I hate you, Dad.
It was never, if you saved one person's life, there were two people that you didn't save.
What you said yesterday, I can't disagree. I've been holding you down. Making you look bad.
No, that's not the point. You stop drinking, you get a little help for yourself.
Hey, you get to a point the hand's been dealt and played.
And so that internal voice which said you fucked up, you're no good, began to express itself either through alcoholism, which was never addressed on the job. It was regarded as something that came with the territory, or through racism.
I think you're an asshole.
I think you're an asshole.
But that hasn't affected how I've treated you on the job.
You really believe that?
Yeah, I really believe it.
You guys make me laugh.
Now, what guys would you be referring to?
Black bosses.
Well, that didn't take long.
Which was a way of dealing with a sense of inadequacy and guilt, where you had to make a difference between yourself and those who, for one reason or another, you either could not help or who would not be helped.
You guys live inside the books. You act like machines, you know? You don't like somebody, you go after them like robo-hums.
Well, you think we might play it close to the vest because we know people are watching for us to mess up?
Oh, it makes you nervous, doesn't it, huh? Somebody always looking over your shoulders, waiting for you to make a mistake.
Or it filtered through an antagonism toward the boss. The job was sacrosanct, capital T, capital J, but the boss was someone you could hate.
Just how exactly do you figure I tried to screw you, Sipowicz? I've watched you crawl inside a bottle and set up housekeeping. I've watched you carry on a private war with some hood that made you crazy for reasons I will never understand. The truth is, I've cut you slack because you were a good cop.
And there is a category of cop, there were more of them in the old days, who were called boss haters. Sipowicz was a boss hater.
There's a difference between dry and sober.
Hey, look. I just want to be able to do my job, huh? I don't want to have to transfer to another precinct. I don't do good in new situations. I've raised that kid.
Raised who?
Kelly.
So all of those unresolved family dynamics were transferred to the workplace.
You're like a father to me, man.
I was able to draw on my own experience in that context materials that had been inaccessible to me because I felt it would be disloyal to tell a family story. I became able to draw on, by dislocating all of that, into work on the show.
Nice catch.
Yeah, well, I'd rather be lucky than good.
How about being boss? Great job.
Thanks.
NYPD Blue just had this gruff, rough, urban sensibility about it, and it really reflected what was going on on the page.
I'm a firm believer that form follows content. If you're truly interested in paying attention to story and to character.
Everyone zip up, wipe their hands off, we gotta get to the back wall.
You're paying attention to that, and therefore it informs the experience as a whole. That content drives form.
Greg Howitt came up with a style that really mirrored that.
You waste your time running like that, man. You're never gonna get away from me.
Thanks for your help, Martinez. You got real moves out there.
I escaped a lot as a youth.
It made it just striking to look at.
Come here, Kelly.
Stephen approached me about NYPD Blue, and my feeling was that I didn't want to do it. We had done what I considered in the best cop show ever done in Hill Street Blues. It just was, how could we improve upon that unless something were pretty fundamentally different about the approach, and not just in terms of storytelling, but in terms of style and look and feel and smell and the essence of it all.
Action! Police! Everyone wipe off!
Greg Howitt, in his way, was as much a creator of this show as David or I, because he brought such an energy and a visual style to the show.
I had some ideas about music, I had some ideas about style, and I had some ideas about editing.
Greg had a big influence on something that we all now recognize as an archetype of NYPD Blue, and that is the subway sound. The subway sound in the title sequence is orchestrated in the timpani drums. I don't know if they're timpani, but they're the whole percussion section.
Stephen says, let me ask you a question. I said, yeah. He said, has there ever been a theme with just drums? I said, what? So I turned to Greg, I said, okay, genius, what's the deal? He goes, I got a lot more to say. I said, I really do. I said, okay, what? He said, subway. I went, this bozo's gonna say drums, and this bozo's gonna say subway. And I went, you know what? I know exactly what to do.
That opening main title is as thrilling a 60 seconds of music married to visuals as I've ever seen on any show ever.
There's also a commercial director by the name of Leslie Decter, whose use of the camera I had really become quite attracted to watching some of his spots.
You know, a lot of people call it, you know, shaky cam or erratic camera movement, swish pans.
And I knew that you could edit the show in certain ways off those particular kind of camera moves.
What was that?
New suspect in that liquor store shooting.
And with the idea of the music in certain ways punctuating cuts. So I said to Stephen, these are things that I kind of would like. They weren't demands, they were just, this is what I'd like to do.
I so admired Greg's integrity as a director that while I would argue with him sometimes about choices he was making, it never occurred to me to say, you can't do that.
He was great. He just said, I'll trust that this is going to work out. The whole notion was that the camera would be an active participant in the proceedings. It wouldn't be just a passive recorder of what was going on. And if the scene had a very quiet demeanor to it, a very quiet essence to it, the camera would be relatively quiet and just be there and move when it needed to move and give it a little bit of life, but not be in any way active.
Initial here to show that you declined legal and union representation while you were giving the statement.
But if the scene either began to ramp up, began to accelerate into something more intense, or began that way right off the bat, that camera was just moving.
Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. Let's go. Hands. Doing here? Slowly. Take the bathroom. Up. What the Get hell up. is going on? Yo, what's this, man? Nothing we can't talk about down at the station. Up.
Well, can I at least get my robe?
And if it quieted down, the camera would quiet down. And when done right, it would just, this thing would just be an adjunct to it would be a visual adjunct, an enhancer to the content and the dialogue and performance.
If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand?
I don't need to understand since I didn't do anything.
Luis, listen to this. It's important.
Every time we would get our dailies, I felt like I was going treasure hunting, finding these interesting pieces that could supplement the story and add to it visually. And as an editor, I've always felt that there's been great, fun, interesting visual material to work with that has just been delightful to add to the story.
I always likened it to a bad cab ride uptown on Amsterdam Avenue, where you're kind of jostled all the way through.
For God's sakes, let's get this moving. I gotta make a living.
Morning.
time yesterday?
I'm from Phoenix.
It really kind of puts you into the whole framework of the city and the energy that you feel when you're in New York.
We just want to ask you a few questions.
Yeah, I heard, all right? The answer's no, so go suck at some donuts and get out of my way! Hey, hey, hey! Hey, you! Hey, pal!
Andy, come here! Let him go! Throw radio ahead, Andy!
It took educating everybody. I mean, there was the cameraman, the operator. The operator was about ready to lose his mind because it was violating every rule in his book.
Yo, what'd I do, man? What's the charge?
See those hands? You're under arrest for armed robbery.
Oh, yeah? Come here.
We were sometimes confused.
Will you hurt the man, honey?
Okay, swing over to her now. Sit in line again.
Will you hurt the man, honey?
And people thought that it was against the normal operating, and it was not real operating.
One more time.
No.
Swing back. No, keep rolling. Come on.
Okay.
Swing back over. Swing back over to where the whip came from. Where the whip came. Left, pan left. Okay, ready? Whip over, and I'll say action to you, and you do your line. No, go to her. Ready, and action!
Will you hurt the man, honey?
Up. Back. All right, cut.
I kind of agreed with them. I was not proud of my work. I felt as if it was bad operating. Bad operating.
Yo, man, what'd I do? What's the charge?
Go ahead, Martinez. You're under arrest for armed robbery, right?
Oh, yeah?
Watch her! Hey! Hey!
Louise!
Hey, hey, hey! Come here! Come here! Come here! Ah!
It changed when I saw the shows because it's very hard. I only knew one part of the puzzle.
Buy the numbers! Yeah, okay, buy the numbers, right. Lounge for you, you dickhead. Otherwise, your nuts would be saying goodbye, Johnson. Hello, eyeballs.
The film just sort of reverberated. It just had an edge. It had an anxiety, and so we just kept embracing that.
Line them up, man.
I could sit back with the monitors.
Come on, line them up.
And have a little microphone and put headsets on the operators and just talk to them. And just say, go here, go there. Look at this, go to his hand, go up to this, go to the cigarette, go here, go whatever. And these guys were just always ready to fly somewhere. And so some of it was improv. You set up the scene, you set up the shot, then you'd just be ready to sort of rock and roll with it.
Line them up, Leon.
Hi, Andy.
Come on, line them up.
I remember knowing that, especially Greg Hoblet, would be able to pick up and choose certain physicalities that other directors may not focus on. And there's one scene in particular that I remember doing. It was a scene where Andy and Sylvia have had a rough time, and he's apologizing to her, and she's accepting his apology, and they are indeed in the squad room, so they can't really be very demonstrative. But one little thing that I did was just to reach up and gently touch his tie. And it was very personal, very private, in a very public place and very intimate. And Greg Hoblet saw it and chose to focus on that, just my hand touching his tie. So those kinds of details for a director to be able to pick up and make use of, for me as an actor, makes me feel like I've got a great partner there.
The fun of casting and the magic of casting is that it is a real process, it's a process of discovery. And sometimes what you started out looking for is not what you end up with.
What are you, smartass?
No.
You know, I had a day job as a doorman at a hotel in Central Park South. I was on a break, I think a lunch break, and I had my doorman pants. I threw on a sweater, and I kind of ran up to the Columbus Circle where they were reading, everybody. And I only read once, and I said like a couple of words, like, hands up, freeze.
James Martinez, detective. I heard a lot about you. Anyways, I can help.
I don't know what you heard about me, but there's a temporary assignment. Don't unpack your bags, okay?
I can work with that.
I saw this role of Medavoy, and I thought, well, this guy has a desk in the squad, and I'd like to sit at that desk, maybe next week and the week after.
This is Detective Medavoy.
So I threw a little spin into the audition. I said everything twice, as a kind of a nervous, almost a nervous tick.
There was a couple ran a liquor store in North Carolina. They got pistol whipped during a robbery down there.
David Milch liked it, and months later, or weeks later, they called and they said they wanted me to come in for a couple of days and do this role.
I've been talking to a physician. Actually, he's a shrink. About my.
Today, Medavoy, huh?
And Brad Silberling was directing.
Gordon Clapp comes in. We do a very quick rehearsal. I start shooting, and I feel so awful for this actor because the stutter is coming out.
He kept asking me to do it again, and I did it again and again and again.
And I go, take 3, take 4, and the stutter keeps coming out.
And he got into editing, and he said, this guy has a terrible stutter, and is there any way of cutting around this?
I'm doing my best to try to get past line by line the dialogue so that I can cut together a performance. And then later say, guys, who did you cast? You have somebody who has a tremendous impediment here.
The editor knew enough to say, well, I think he does that as a character.
It was 2 days later, and he came up to me and he said, yeah, somebody should have told you about the character. And I was like, oh, my God.
But there was no Bible on the character at that point, so nobody really knew, nobody outside the production knew that this guy had a stutter.
Is he okay?
I'm sorry, this is Detective Medavoy.
Pleased to meet you. Gordon Clapp and I met, and there was just an instantaneous, we just had instant chemistry.
I have this introduction to her where I'm completely tongue-tied and nonplussed, and I thought, well, they've got to do something with this.
Donna,
Hi.
you still going skating after work?
Yeah?
Could I go with you?
Great.
Gail was like this delicious little, well, her character was great. She was great to look at. She had a great storyline. So I think that she, had an immediate popularity.
Just crumple 2 pieces of aluminum foil and stuff them in your undershorts. It defeats their sensor rays.
It was catching a train that was already, going. And so you really had to, hit the ground running when you stepped on that set. Because they were so good.
My problem is that I think I'm in love with you.
I read for Sherry's part, for Sherry Stringfield's part, and didn't particularly click with the material. It was Stephen Bochco, David Milch, and Greg Hoblet in the room. And I was just irritated having to be, I just had all this attitude. I don't know where the hell I got it from. But I wanted to go back to New Haven. And so they said, well, read this other part. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get on a later train. So I went out and I looked at the material and I came back in and I messed up some of the lines. And kind of half joking, half not, I said, look, I said to David, if I'm going to say these lines, you're going to have to change them. And I was like, well, and I left and I got the part. And I think they thought, the part was this, obviously really tough New York. I'm like little soft, suburban, like pale girl.
You're a prick.
But I think I just had all this attitude that day, and I got the part.
Does it need saying, Detective Kelly? My chief witness thinks that he is a furry carnivore.
Okay, let me tell you something about Louis. He has his ways, but down deep.
He's a stand-up wolf.
Sharon Lawrence came in. She had a small 2-line part. It was a one-shot deal.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
In fact, I'm not absolutely positive, but I think that part originally was a guy.
The character did not have a name. It was listed as ADA, standing for Assistant District Attorney, and it was written for a man. The clear reason that it was written for a man was when Sipowicz grabs his crotch, he says, "Ipsa this, you pissy little bastard." Well, I think it was pretty obvious they were looking for a guy. But somewhere in their casting sessions, they decided that they wanted to open it up and see women for this role. I think it made sense in terms of showing the real complexion of what a courtroom in that district of Manhattan looked like. And it helped flesh out, so to speak, the makeup of the show.
So I guess I owe you an apology.
I don't know. I think I may still owe you for that time outside the court. Maybe I could work some more off at dinner?
And I remember, I think it was Dennis that had talked to me about the murmurings of a potential relationship.
I wasn't squeezing your shoes, Andy. I didn't want your case to go away.
You had a point there. I mean, I'll sometimes overlook the niceties. Huh? Listen, you hungry?
Yeah?
Tough.
I think what made
I'll take you out to dinner.
the audience fall in love with Sylvie and Andy, and they did, they really did, was a combination of factors. I think not the least of which is their desire to pull for Andy as the anti-hero.
I haven't had sex sober in about 20 years.
You're not going to scare me off, Andy. I know what you were like. And I know what you're like now.
I don't want to say he's an underdog, but he is the type of character whose complexity could exasperate and inspire at the same time. And this relationship, I think, was a window into that.
Are you going to keep drinking?
I don't want to. No.
It allowed the audience to love him, to see a softer side, a side that wanted to be better, a side that had an inherent vulnerability that you just could not have gotten in the squad room in ways that wouldn't seem contrived.
The way that you're reacting now is the reason that you still need help.
Well, I don't want you discussing my problems with strangers. Don't do that anymore.
Don't give me gifts to act like everything is all right when it's not.
Dennis Franz has been, always will be the weight of the show, the heart of the show.
He really sells a New York City detective, or any real big city detective anywhere, a guy that really cares about the job.
I try to cooperate, but I don't like the tone of this. What are you, psycho?
I know you were involved in this. I can feel it coming off of you, and I'm going to put this all together.
No, you're wrong about this.
You're not going to get out of this. I'm not going to let you leave.
Dennis is a guy, in all the characters he plays, who just is not comfortable in his own skin. And who has a lot of misplaced anger.
All right, you want to split up? That's no problem. It's no problem at all. Get your hands off of me. Get your hands off of me!
I remember having lunch with David and Stephen, and I said, who is going to give a damn about this guy? Who's going to care about him?
Andy, come in.
Get away. Just get away from me, Kelly. Or so help me, I'll clean your clock.
And David and Stephen both looked at me and they said, well, you will make him likable and make people care about him. And I said, well, thanks for that vote of confidence, but how's that going to happen? And they said, because it's you.
You know what, fellas? I'm considering a whole new organizational approach on my work area here, you know? You see this section here, huh? This quadrant, I may reserve for these little yellow note reminders with the glue on the back, you know? And over here, this area, I think I'm going to restrict to paperweights and animal magnets, maybe those little giraffes.
So I thought of a backstory. I'm looking at Andy as a man who I think was a good father at one time. He was a good husband. I think that the inner makings of this person is a very good man. He's a good cop, and something went wrong in his life, and this downhill slide started happening that he couldn't put the brakes on, and we're introduced to Sipowicz at the very bottom of this slide, and by all rights, he probably should have died in that first episode, but he's given a second lease on life.
Hey, buddy. What's going on? Welcome back.
I think his appeal that the audiences had for him, I think kind of was a surprise to everybody that they found this guy to be so fascinating.
Once or twice each calendar year, justice does not prevail. Now, on the bright side, my own point of view, I may be keeping company with a blue inner tube, but I wake up sober every morning. I don't feel like I got hit in the head by a Cessna. I'm in the running to get my job back. Plus, a buddy saw me through some tough times. So who's got it better than me?
Then the show certainly became about two detectives.
Hold on. Kelly.
Kelly.
Instead of one main guy and a second banana.
Okay, I'll be right there.
going
Andy, I gotta take a rain check on dinner.
I thought David Caruso was one of the most interesting, fresh faces on television.
I'll stop pulling my weight on this, all right?
Yeah, that's why I asked you. I keep very close tabs, you know. I figure I carry you for another 3 or 4 years, you're going to start owing me.
We developed a great chemistry between those two characters. Professionally, what he had accomplished with that character, I thought was really admirable the first year.
Judge, how's it gonna look, you giving the guy who killed his kid 14 months and then putting him in jail, too, because he made you wet your pants?
We govern by law.
David has a process of working that is what works best for him.
Don't tell me how you govern. I work your streets. I clean up after how you govern. The way you govern stinks.
David tortured himself a lot, and he is very, very hard on himself.
I'm not going to do this again.
Okay. I want to see this asshole.
But it's not like he would torture himself and then come up with crap. It's like he really was like nothing I'd ever seen, especially on television.
I want to find out what's going on.
No. Then you'd be involved, too.
Janice, I am involved.
At the end of that first season, he was the hottest thing on television. He was getting many offers. He had opportunities that he wanted to take advantage of, and whether he made the right decision or wrong decision, that's anybody's guess.
Now I'm inconveniencing you. I'm making a lot of enemies, detective.
He thought he was going to go off and be a giant movie star. And as we started getting closer and closer to production for the second season, I thought, I know exactly what's going to happen. This guy wasn't going to show up. I just knew it. And I thought, if he doesn't show up, it's just going to be a nightmare. And so I called ABC, and I said, I'm going to let this guy go. I don't want him on my show.
David functioned by creating dysfunction. And it certainly made for a very tough set to be on sometimes, and a place where people come together as a family and need to take care of each other, much like two cops need to take care of each other, you know?
David Milch, who is, a very, very dear friend of mine, was sick, and Caruso didn't do anything to make that any easier to take. So I wish him all the luck in the world, but I was really happy to see him go.
I knew we were going to be fine. Out of my experience with Hill Street Blues and LA Law, what I really believed was that the show was the star. If we could maintain the tone, the quality, the consistency, and the storytelling of NYPD Blue, it was the star itself.
You don't owe me dick, all right?
Tell him it's Lois, dickhead.
I was balling all night.
If you've got it in your minds that I'm going to be cooperating with you, then your minds must be up your asses with the rest of your heads.
Hey, Gina, you eat with that mouth?
Left now, you dickhead!
When one of my friends saw the pilot, he says, I believe that's the first time I've heard dickhead on television.
In the police department, we do get down and dirty with people. There's a lot of people that we're dealing with that they need to be told pretty strongly what we're trying to convey to them.
Are you going to charge me or release me?
I may smack you in your face, you little turd. You ask me that one more time.
Dickhead, all right? I want to be charged or released.
What are these, new sneakers, huh? What happened to the other ones? They got covered with blood?
I was just hoping that we could get past the groundswell of opinions that would be out there as far as doing this on network television.
Did I miss something?
Yeah. Me getting my balls squeezed.
And my name's James, you little piss pot.
They wanted a deal.
You didn't give him anything.
I didn't give him dick.
If this show was totally realistic as far as the language goes, people would really be complaining, you know.
Back then, we had an Irish department. Oh, we had some Guineas, we had Jews, we had a few niggers, but it was an Irish department, and this city was livable.
In terms of the language that was so extreme, that infamous scene at the teaser of the pilot episode.
Hey! Ipsa this, you pissy little bitch!
The fact is, it revealed more about his character and more about her, meaning Sylvia, than if that word wasn't in there.
That would be Richie Katina, who said to let Jerry know that he spent Christmas Eve bouncing around in your gunya.
I'm unfamiliar with that terminology.
When the networks heard me talking about her gunya, they said, "You can't say gunya on TV." And we said, "Well, David said, that why can't you? That I made that word up. That is not a word. That's nothing." They said, "Well, you can't use it on network television." They said, "Well, what?" He said, "Well, it sounds filthy coming out of Sipowitz's mouth."
Oh, well, in that case, put it up your ass.
I think by pushing the envelope and taking chances, a lot of the American public realized, you know what? This is what I hear at my workplace every day. This is what I hear on the street every day. It might not be the way I choose to talk, but it's the way it really goes on out there.
Charlie, you're talking like an asshole.
I think it's loosened up a lot of the drama on television.
Listen to me, John. If I wasn't really rich, I'd be an asshole.
I don't think language was ever the issue. I think that the nudity was an issue, though.
The idea of having me particularly involved in nudity was absurd.
I'm kind of shy when it comes to that. But if I had to, I would have showed my butt.
I thought, well, this will never come to fruition, that I had to sign a nudity clause. And I said, then it's to no avail to me, because I know what I look like, and they're not going to show that on TV.
I really went from my gut in terms of, am I going to be taken care of in the situation? And I knew that I was, so it's like, let's go for it.
There were certain restrictions on what we could show of the body. You could show people's butts, but you couldn't show anything below the waist in front. And as far as women's breasts, you could not show any nipple. So even though these things were shot a particular way, when it came to the editing room, we had to stop at that frame where you might possibly see a nipple, or we would hear it from the people from Standards and Practices.
If it's the scene, then this is what's amazing about NYPD Blue. It's not like, or at least that first year, it wasn't like, and now we pause for some little fleshy. It's like, it was a scene about people connecting, and instead of words, they had their bodies. And so you knew what you were doing.
Wait.
What's wrong?
It feels like there's something else in bed with us. That's what's wrong.
That's a weird thing to say.
It's a weird feeling.
It titillated people and got people all hot and bothered in ways that were beside the point. At the end of the day, if you don't have a good story and you're not telling it well, through the characters that are clearly drawn and effectively presented, it doesn't matter.
Audiences saw the quality and the content of the storytelling, the integrity of the ideas, the complexity of the characters, and that, I believe, is what people keep tuning in for.
You want to fold that up, or...
There was something that was really revealed about the characters that was a lot more important than the skin that was shown. So I felt very comfortable in the choice that the writers or producers would make. And if there was ever a time that I didn't, that I thought it was extraneous, I'd speak up and they would listen to me.
I never felt comfortable about performing those kind of scenes.
I should probably go if, maybe you're not even interested.
Gregory, I'm interested. I was happy that I always got to keep my clothes on. I mean, that was the only thing that made me nervous, is that, so episode after episode, it was the first thing that I checked, that they, that my clothes were on.
I can't believe this.
I had one episode where I did a side view.
Well, you're a detective.
And I was scared to death that day, and I was extremely nervous about it. But it was a side view from the waist up, and down here, but waist down, I had on sweatpants and sweat socks, and, was taped and pulled and the whole thing.
And cut. Okay, somebody go help her.
1 second.
Somebody help me.
There you go.
A friend of mine, we were talking about the first season of NYPD Blue, and she was saying, oh, it's just so, she's like, it holds up. I guess it's on a rerun. She's like, I look at you in the first season, you have this like ratty little white cop. It's like a bra that a cop would wear, and I'm thinking, okay, that was my own bra. And that was probably really revolutionary, that I wouldn't have said, get me a nice look. But because I had, it was dingy, it was just an old, ratty bra. But I thought, you know what? That's probably what this woman would wear. And I think it all contributed to the authenticity of it.
You've moved away from your artistry ever since.
I have. It's like, get me some nice goddamn lingerie.
They give you little protection things to use. They give you little elastic socks, if you will, that with tape, and you can put them in certain areas. But then you get into the shower, and the shower water comes down, and the tape goes away, and so does the little elastic sock. So, once it's gone, you're there, and you just get used to it. After second, third take, you say, all right, forget the little thing, and let's just do it.
Into the water, right into the water. Good. And cutting.
We were getting a lot of response from people on the streets, especially that first season, because primarily David Caruso was doing a lot of the love scenes, and every other week you were seeing his ass on TV, and so people in New York in particular were passing on the street as we'd be filming, and they'd yell out, "Yo, Sipowicz, when are we going to see your ass?"
And they don't want to show the nice butts, they always want to show these the mushy asses.
Hey, Kelly, you want to sit on a butt like cottage cheese? Be my guest. Meanwhile, I'll be sitting on this.
Gotta admit, Lieutenant, guy's got a hell of a muscular ass.
I can remember watching this show the first time and seeing the New York City Police Detective sheet pop up. It just struck me, and I realized up until then it was all, we're making something, but when you actually sit home in your living room and watch this thing unfold, it was really made a big impression on me.
The first season of NYPD Blue was a great beginning. I enjoyed coming to work every day. I knew that the stories were going to be great. I knew that everyone was involved in a wonderful experiment, in a sense.
Sorry, I got somebody. And it was fun because every episode you would learn something new, and it would give you, it would make you brave in terms of trying the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And it's like, wow, we can do this. Wow, we can do this. Wow, we can do this. And it continued to just allow you to be more aggressive and be more provoking photographically.
Art. We were all in New York together when the second episode aired. The first had done incredibly well, but as they say in movies, you can buy the first weekend. You can buy those grosses with marketing. The second outing is always the truth teller. And I remember standing with David, and it was on that first New York trip. We were all together. We'd all gone to like an Irish bar the night before, watched the show, and the numbers came in the next morning, and I saw him actually take a step backwards because he knew it was like a big moment where he suddenly knew the responsibility on his shoulders because the numbers were big. And I remember him looking at me saying, "Oh God, I'm going to cause so much trouble."
So
there was a spotlight now on the show, and it was the darling of almost all of the critics, and it was such a popular success, and so that created its own set of stresses. And then I think it was the 12th episode or something, I'd been feeling like hell for a while, and I finally went in, and they saw that I had a bunch of clogged arteries, and so they did an angioplasty, and then I got sick the next week, and they did another angioplasty, and meanwhile I was trying to keep writing, and so it was a mess.
If NYPD Blue had been the first show I'd ever done, I don't think I would have survived. But I had the good fortune of having done some very difficult shows in the past, and you learn from those experiences. And somehow we got ourselves through that first year.
The first season changed television.
I promised my boy at his grave I was going to give him some justice.
Mr. Daniels, there is no justice for what happened to your boy.
I think it reconfirmed network television in its traditional form.
Do you want a drink? It's on the house.
Can't, Ernie. I'm a drunk.
The possibilities of what an audience would pay attention to if the audience was shown a certain amount of respect.
I loved to read the letters from and to talk to a cop or talk to a lawyer who just would say, "You did good."
If push comes to shove, you'll make her testify.
Yes, if push comes to shove, I will make her testify. Welcome to the world, sweetie.
Everybody had a sense, on both sides of the camera, that we were really on to something. And everybody brought their A game every day. And, as crazy as some of us are, it was a great way to live. And I'm awful glad I got the chance to do it.